Was there an expectation for you? Was it just like unspoken that you would marry an Indian man?
It was spoken.
It was spoken.
It was spoken. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the two major things that I could do would be become a doctor to bring pride to the family. And of course, marry an Indian person. Yeah.
But you didn't marry an Indian.
I did not.
Why did you not marry an Indian?
You know, I think whether it's living in America, having American friends, very early on, the bug got into my head that I would only marry for love. And
because you knew about marriages being arranged, that you would not marry because you had to, or it was an expectation.
Absolutely. I even did my thesis in sociology in college at Louisiana College on whether it was better to have an arranged marriage or not to have an arranged marriage. And arranged marriages do better than non-arranged marriages in lots of categories, you know, if you want to get scientific about it. But even though I was susceptible to heavy encouragement on pretty much every other issue, for whatever reason, it became ingrained in me that I decided I would only marry who I wanted and that I would marry for love.
And so when you start dating, were you dating men that were Indian?
So the typical, in the Indian culture, men and women don't date. Your parents arrange your marriage and then you get married.
But surely since you're an American Indian and you live in America, that wouldn't be how your marriage would be arranged, right?
Well, a lot of people here, once they immigrated over, started doing the modified arranged marriage.
Okay. What does that mean? The modified.
The modified arranged marriage is when they arrange your marriage, but they let you like talk to the person first and get to know them, and you can say yay or nay. So you have a little more input, but there's still a heavy influence of the parents. So my parents being very traditional, I did what any good Indian girl would do, and I just had boyfriends secretly. And I think a lot of my Indian friends did. You know, we had a very tight-knit network of an Indian community in Alexandria. It's still going strong 40 years later. And so, you know, I had boyfriends, nothing serious because I couldn't, you know, really go out on dates. So it's really just talking on the phone and seeing each other at school. But I was attracted to American boys because I guess it was a form of rebellion against my parents.
And so the man that you ultimately married was not Indian.
Correct. His name is Jacob. He's a white American from Shreveport. And
so how do you present that to your parents? How does that conversation unfold?
Carefully. How do I say? I wonder if my parents will ever see this.
Probably.
You know, I told my mom first because I'm closer to my mom, and she was very
And you knew she was going to understand, or you wanted her to understand.
Yeah, absolutely. I knew that she would understand more. I mean, she always kind of knew about my secret boy. Moms always know.
Yes.
They just know. So she was very resistant to meeting him or, you know, to the idea just because she knew how my dad would react. And I didn't want an issue to come between them as a married couple, but, you know, you got to do what you got to do. So and eventually, after a couple of months of arguing and trying to see each other from different perspectives, it took about 3 months, but eventually my parents met Jacob. And if anybody knows me or knows Jacob, he was very persistent and firm. He's a very old soul. And he kind of made a stand like, you know, look, I love your daughter. I understand your concerns, but I'm not going anywhere. And so eventually they met him, and 7 years later, they love him. I mean,
was there
part of the family as anyone else?
Was there a fear that by marrying outside of your culture, that your culture would somehow be diluted?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. And I understand that because I have that fear myself. It would be very convenient to have fallen in love with an Indian man and us share a culture and movies and everything, but I didn't. And so whoever I did marry, I knew that it would have to be someone who was as in love with the Indian culture, if not more, as me, so that they would help me preserve it. But yes, of course, it was a fear of my parents to have their culture diluted, because moving to America already is a giant step in that direction. And then also just the approach to marriage in the Western versus Eastern civilizations and cultures is very different. And my dad's all about data and numbers and statistics and, comparing the divorce rate of this culture to this culture. And everything has to be about like, what's the best case scenario for keeping my girl safe? That's like his MO for everything.
So do you and Jacob have the conversation about the cultural differences and how your culture is celebrated and the traditions and the things that you and your family and your culture hold dear, and versus his family's culture and traditions and everything that they hold dear?
Yeah, absolutely. And that was something we talked about before we even got engaged, because I was like, listen, cards on the table. We need to talk about this, because this is what I need. This is what I want. What about you? But Jacob is amazing in many ways, but he was completely on board for the plan of sharing all our traditions with each other, sharing all the culture, and then passing those on to the children that we might have in the future. So Ari gets the benefit of many things. He'll go and have samosas and listen to Indian music with my parents. And then he'll, go and have crawfish and ride around in a four-wheeler with his American grandparents. I mean, it's just like, it's such starkly different upbringings, and he's getting both of them, which is kind of amazing.
And what about the language? And you had said earlier that you wanted him to have the gift of being able to speak both languages. And I'm sure he's just probably starting to talk now.
Correct. Yes. Yeah. He's almost 17 months. He's saying a few words, but I asked my parents to speak Hindi around him so that he can get used to the diction and the way everything is pronounced. And it's much easier to learn new languages when you're a child than an adult. I mean, they're just sponges. So I want him to be able to be fluent in both languages. And of course, that means I have to brush up on my Hindi, because I used to speak it fluently, but many years away from India and speaking it and not speaking it has, I'm very rusty.
So have you made a concerted effort to brush up on your own Hindi?
Yeah, I mean, I try to practice it with my parents, and then my husband also wants to learn it. So we've got the Rosetta Stone, and we're doing the Hindi languages lessons. But the main thing is really, if you just watch a bunch of Hindi movies, that's the best lesson that anyone can get.